Prepare for a truth revolution.
Actually, you can prove God exists.
Questioning tradition, because what you've been taught isn't always true.
The truth will set you.
Welcome to Truth Revolution. This is where faith and reason meet. I am Pastor Dave. That guy is Pastor Jeff. We're from Revolution Church.
And we love faith. We love Jesus. We also love reason and science. And, we're talking today with some people from a place called Reasons to Believe. Have them on periodically throughout the year.
What kind of place do you think that is?
Reasons to believe.
I don't know.
I suppose they give good reasons to believe.
There you go.
And we're going to have one today. It's only 1 week away from Christmas today.
Right.
So in 1 week, we're going to be celebrating an event that occurred, the birth of Jesus Christ. But leading up to that birth, there was a star or a meteor or the moon was on fire.
Right. There was something bright in the sky.
Or maybe it was just a myth. We don't know.
Swamp gas?
We're going to swamp gas.
Yeah.
I'm going with swamp gas until we learn what actually happened. But yeah, you should come out to Revolution Church. We would love to have you. We meet at 10 o'clock, 11:30, and 5 p.m. We've been growing. Would love to have you come on out with us. We don't care what you look like. We literally don't. It doesn't matter to us.
Right.
We just want you to enjoy Christmas with us. And Christmas is on a Sunday, so we're not doing a Christmas Eve service. We're doing a Christmas Day service. All three of them, 10 o'clock, 11:30, 5 p.m.
And as always, it's going to be great.
It's going to be great. So if you haven't come on out, you got to come on out today or next week during Christmas. But Dave, tell us who's on the show today.
Hugh Ross. He's been with us quite a few times.
I think 100 times this year.
Yeah, about that. Anyway, astronomer Hugh Ross is founder and president of Reasons to Believe, an organization dedicated to integrating scientific fact and biblical faith. His books include Why the Universe is the Way It Is, Hidden Treasures in the Book of Job, and Navigating Genesis. Hey, man, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's good to have you on here again. Last week we interviewed Dr. Gary Habermas. This week we're talking with you again, and
We're getting spoiled.
You feel spoiled. I feel insignificant. I feel like I'm
Well, both are true, actually.
but it is just a great honor to have you on here again. We always love having you with us, and you are an astronomer by trade, and you got into that at a fairly young age, isn't that right?
Yeah, it started when I was 7 years of age.
Wow. How did you get into astronomy at 7 years old?
Well, I was walking on at night with my parents, and I asked them the question, Mom, Dad, are those stars up there hot? They said, they're very hot. I said, please, tell me why they're hot. They said, go to the library. And so I did. I took a bus by myself at age 7 to the Vancouver Public Library, came back with 5 books on astronomy, and the next weekend I read 5 more. And by the time I was 8 years of age, I knew that would be my future career.
Oh, my goodness.
All right. So now I feel insignificant.
There you go, Dave. That's right. But that is amazing. And so you went through, you are a doctor, you are a PhD, you studied, Carl Sagan was one of your professors for a class, I believe.
For a short time, yeah.
For a short time. And so you have done a lot of research. As we talked before, you've spent a lot of hours on dark, lonely country roads looking up into the stars. When we come to this section in the book of Matthew, it says, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi, or wise men, came from the east, came to Jerusalem and asked, where is the one who's been born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him. Now, there are all sorts of explanations for this. The IVB commentary says astronomers have offered various proposals. The ancients thought comets and falling stars predicted the fall of rulers. That's kind of an interesting note, that they used to believe that it predicted rulers when comets or falling stars would come. Actually, this is kind of interesting. The Emperor Nero reportedly slaughtered many nobles in the hope that their deaths, rather than his own, would fulfill the prediction of a comet. So that's kind of interesting. So, let's get into this. What are some of the more popular beliefs about this star that predicted Jesus' birth? What are some of the ones that you've heard, and give us some thoughts on them?
Well, there's over 100 books that have been published trying to explain what the Christmas star was.
Wow.
Vast majority speculate that the star was a conjunction of planets. So it would be 2 planets coming close together in the sky, or the movement of a planet into the vicinity of a bright star. The one that's favored the most is Regulus, which is the king star in the constellation of Leo, and you can kind of see where people are trying to go with that in terms of the tribe of Judah, lion.
Yeah.
And then others are saying it's a very bright comet or a supernova eruption. But as an astronomer, I argue, based on what we see in the text, not just in Matthew, but in Daniel chapter 9, I think we can discern rather accurately what that star was. Because the Matthew text tells us that it's a single star. So this idea of a conjunction of planets, or a planet with the moon or with a bright star, that's two objects, not one object. It also tells us that the star reappeared, like a year to a year and a half later. How do we get that time spread? Notice they did not know the location. They knew the timing. And it's the book of Daniel, chapter 9, that actually it's the only passage in the Bible that predicts the timing of the coming of the Messiah. And Daniel was the greatest of the wise men. So these wise men from the east, I'm sure, would have been familiar with the prophecy of Daniel. They knew at least approximately the timing of the coming of Messiah, so they were looking for a sign. But you notice in the text, though, no one else seemed to be aware of this sign except for the Magi. So we should expect something subtle. A supernova would have been recorded by everybody, and a supernova will not reappear. That's the same problem with a comet. Yes, they're very bright, but everybody would have noticed it, and they don't reappear in the same location. And so, from an astronomical perspective, I think the best explanation is that it's either a cataclysmic variable star, or what I think is more likely a recurring nova. And that would be a star that would suddenly appear in the sky, but it wouldn't be a very bright star. It would be probably something that would show up at about the same brightness as a star Polaris, which means if you're not really looking at the sky every night, you probably wouldn't have even noticed that it was taking place. Matter of fact, the only other recorded reference we have to this star, possible recorded reference, is that the Koreans recorded the appearance of a nova in 5 BC. And that would be approximately the timing of the birth of Christ. But you notice that when the wise men inquired of King Herod he said, "Tell me the date that you saw the star."
Yes.
And based on what they said, he later killed all the firstborn sons in the village of Bethlehem that were 2 years of age or younger.
That's right.
It tells me that the separation between the two appearances of the star was probably something like a year to a year and a half to explain Herod's actions. And that fits very well, either a cataclysmic variable star or a recurring nova. And for a long time, the recurring nova idea, I published this, 20, 30 years ago, but I thought a recurring nova was the explanation. And a lot of my astronomy peers and others said it can't be, because we don't see any recurring nova with a period as short as a year and a half. Shortest we observed was about 10 years. But what has happened in the last year, astronomers have seen 2 recurring nova with periods that are less than 2 years. In fact, one was only 1 year. So we now know that there actually can be nova that will burst and increase greatly in brightness, disappear, and then reappear later. We also understand the physical mechanism that drives the recurring nova. So I still stand by that as the best explanation, and to point out why the conjunction explanations, which are so prevalent in all these books, can't be correct. They get the wrong timing. In fact, the best attempt I saw where they said, well, there's actually one conjunction that takes place in 1 BC where you got Jupiter and Venus coming so close together that they would appear to merge to be one star. The problem with that is it's the wrong date, because Herod was dead by that time. And the other thing is that, yes, they do come together and would appear to be a single star to the naked eye, but only for 1 hour, and not in the region of Israel or the east. And so, again, the details don't match. I'm still convinced that it's either recurring nova, most likely, and less likely, a cataclysmic variable star.
Okay, so 2 questions on that. If it's a recurring nova, like how long do recurring novas last? How long do they appear in the sky for?
Well, they're kind of like a supernova, and that they're at their maximum brightness for a few months, and then they disappear. And so it would be a star that would be invisible to the naked eye. It would go through a nova phase, where it would be bright for 2 or 3 months, and it would disappear, and you wouldn't be able to see it from the naked eye. And then 1 year, 2 years later, it would go through the same episode again. And the thing I like about recurring nova, when they do recur, they recur with about the same brightness that they did the previous time. With a cataclysmic variable star, the brightness can be very different with each cataclysmic eruption.
That's fascinating. Okay. And then in Matthew chapter 2, now this is something that is new or has not occurred to me before, that it was a recurring event. I've always taken it just to be one event. How do you get that it was 2 different events?
Well, they saw the star in the east.
Yes.
And based on that event, they mounted an expedition to go to Jerusalem.
Right.
And then when they got to Jerusalem, they inquired of the scribes and Pharisees there, can you tell us the location? They said, oh, yes, it's in the Book of Micah, chapter 5, verse 2. It's Bethlehem. And so they went on their way to Bethlehem. And while they're on their way, you see this in the Matthew text, while they're on their way, the star reappeared.
Oh, yes. And verse 9, while they went on the way, and the star they had seen when it rose, went ahead of them and stopped over the place to tell them what. You're right. Okay.
Wow.
Look at that.
That is awesome.
We encouraged them that they were on the right track. Now, a lot of English translations mistranslate what the star does. Basically gives the impression that the light of the star pointed them right to where they would find Jesus. Mm-hmm. The Greek verb there is systeme. It's got 30 distinct literal definitions.
Wow.
And they didn't need the star to tell them the location. Once they found out it was Bethlehem, Bethlehem is a tiny village. It would have been no great difficulty to find a couple with a firstborn son that was about a year to a year and a half old. So that would have been an easy thing for them to do. And you should see in the text, Herod said, when you find this Messiah, let me know so that I can visit too. But notice that the Magi got a dream saying, don't go back to Herod.
Yes.
So they slipped away. And so that's why Herod had to literally kill all the firstborn sons that he could find 2 years of age and under. He kind of went to ballistic in respect.
And we actually, we know from history, I mean, a lot of people will say, hey, there is no record of a genocide of infants and toddlers in Bethlehem. But at that point in time, Bethlehem was a fairly, as you just said, was a fairly small town. And the number of people who would have children 2 and under, I mean, you're looking at maybe a dozen kids.
Right.
And Herod was already...
low as 3 or 4. We're only talking 1,000 people in the village of Bethlehem.
Yeah.
And if you're talking couples that have a firstborn son that's 1.5 to 1 year of age, you're probably looking at a maximum of 4 or 5. So yeah, we're not looking at a genocide. We're looking at people going through the village and basically taking care of those 4 or 5 infants or toddlers that they had found.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and just to be clear, you're absolutely right on that Greek word where it says that it stood over the house. Well, that word stood, as you just pointed out, it can just means establish, present, it just, that vicinity. Right. So yeah, hey, we're coming up to a break here. We're going to come back and we're going to ask some questions, not just about the star or the recurring nova, but we're also going to ask about, is this astrology? Is this okay to do?
Right.
How is that okay? Are there any other options that are possible? And keep going on from there. So, Dave, where should they go?
TruthRevolution.tv.
Why should they go there?
Because they can catch past shows, they can catch true shots, and they can donate and ask questions.
And we answer every single question that comes in, even if it's the wrong answer.
Right.
But we respond.
That would be from me.
We respond to everything. So, hey, we'll be right back after this break with Dr. Hugh Ross from Reasons to Believe.
Truth Revolution.
And we are back. We are talking to Hugh Ross today, Dr. Hugh Ross from Reasons to Believe, and we're talking about the Star of Bethlehem.
That's right.
You know, what was it?
It wasn't a star. It wasn't Jupiter's annual cycle. Wasn't a comet. Wasn't a supernova. Wasn't even the lights off of Chiefs Arrowhead Stadium.
Right.
Although I'm still holding on to that theory. I haven't gotten rid of it yet.
Well, that would involve wormholes and the bending of light around the globe.
Well, go ahead and disprove it, Dave.
I can't.
Okay, thanks. See, I'm going to hold on to this until you can disprove it. So we're going on to that. But Dr. Hugh Ross believes that this was a recurring nova. And let's get in there. Just give us a small recap on the recurring nova, why you think that the Star of Bethlehem was a recurring nova.
Okay, well, the Greek word aster can mean star, comet, meteorite, planet, whatever. That's why there's been such a broad range of suggestions.
Yeah.
But the reason why I believe it's either recurring nova or a cataclysmic variable, the Matthew text is clear. We're looking at a single object. It's a single object that appears bright in the sky, disappears where it becomes invisible, and then a year to a year and a half later, it reappears with the approximate same brightness. And that describes the characteristic of a recurring nova, and to a little lesser degree, that of a cataclysmic variable. But it rules out the most popular explanations, which would be the conjunctions of planets, or a planet with a moon, or a planet with a star. Mm-hmm. Again, the text says a single star that reappeared, and evidently reappeared in the identical location of the first appearance.
That's great. And a lot of people will say maybe it was a comet. The Florentine painter Giotto dei Bondoni, the Adoration of the Magi, the famous painting he did shows a comet. But you say a comet everybody would have seen a comet. And so this isn't something that would have taken a Magi?
Right, because that's what you see in the Matthew text. Evidently, Herod and the scribes and the Pharisees were not at all familiar with the star that the Magi described. So it's something they did not notice. And the only other recording that we see in all of history that could correspond to the event is a Korean astronomical notation that they spotted a nova in the year 5 BC. That might be the Christmas star. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing about a nova. It's not so spectacular that everybody would notice it. But people looking for a sign in the sky, they would pick it up. And that's where I think the passage in the book of Daniel is significant. Daniel 9 verses 24 to 27 is the only text in the Bible that predicts the future timing of the coming of the Messiah.
Yes.
And so if these Magi were familiar with the book of Daniel, I think they must be, because Daniel, after all, was called the greatest of the wise men. So I can't see these wise men in the East not studying the book of Daniel.
Yeah.
So they would have been familiar with the timing, and they would have been looking for some kind of sign.
That's cool. That's great. Yeah, I love the book of Daniel where it talks about that. We've done whole shows on that, just about where it predicts the exact year, which coincidentally, this is really good proof that the religious people of the day didn't have a heart for God, because the Pharisees saw Jesus doing miracles. Mm-hmm. So here's this guy who was born in Bethlehem, the city that was predicted. Yeah. He's doing miracles as was predicted.
Right.
He's quoting Isaiah saying, hey, and this is me, I'm the guy. Uh-huh. And he's there the exact right year that was predicted in the book of Daniel.
And they were totally oblivious.
Yeah. And the Pharisees are still going, I don't care. Let's kill him.
Right.
Do you ever find that odd, Dr. Ross?
Well, I do find it odd, but I think Jesus accused them of being guilty of blasphemy against the Holy Spirit, which means they knew who he was. But what was in their heart is, we will not have this man rule over us. So even knowing who he was, they rejected him.
Yeah.
And that's why Jesus accused them of blasphemy against the Holy Spirit, which means that their hearts were so hardened that they couldn't hear or receive the message of salvation.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. That is what the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit is. So, good. Hey, let's. I got a question about resources. You have some resources about this and things related to this, right?
Well, because there are 3 astronomers on our staff at Reasons to Believe, we get questions all the time about the Christmas star. Mm-hmm. So we have articles, we got video clips, we got audio podcasts that are all up there on our website. We just put into our reasons.org search engine Christmas star, you'll see about half a dozen different resources.
That's awesome.
I've written, and others of which my colleagues have written.
That's great. Reasons.org is their website.
Right.
We're going to link to them
Definitely.
at truthrevolution.tv. So if you've already been to our website, you can just hop over to reasons.org. It's super easy. Their website is great. I'm there probably every week. It's just good stuff. Hey, we're going to jump into a Bible contradiction, then come right back to this.
Bible contradiction.
All right, speaking of blasphemy, which we were just talking about a minute ago, Jesus was accused of blasphemy. Or was it tax evasion? Or was it claiming kingship? Hang on a second. Okay, Matthew 26:65 says, Then the high priest rent his clothes, saying, He has spoken blasphemy. What further need have we of witnesses? Well, Luke 23:2 says, We found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to give tribute to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ the King.
Okay.
But then John 19:12 says, If you let this man go, you are not Caesar's friend. Whosoever maketh himself a king speaks against Caesar.
Okay.
So there's three different charges.
Yeah.
Were these three different times? What's going on here?
Yeah, so this atheist website is saying, which one is it? Is it blasphemy or tax evasion or claiming a king against Caesar? Well, okay, in our cracked acronym, the second C stands for credibility, right? When you're reading documents, especially ancient documents, give them some credit and assume that what they're telling you isn't completely idiotic. All right, so let's listen to this. Is there any way possible that someone could be accused of these three things all at the same time?
Well, if he was doing them all at the same time, I would say that's probably a pretty good shot.
Okay, so if he was doing all three of them, or if there were people trying to come up with false charges against him.
That too.
There's a number of ways that you can... People go into our court system all the time with multiple charges.
Oh, yeah.
Right? No one goes, well, wait a minute. I see this person got arrested for drunk driving, speeding, and for getting in a fight. They can't be possibly arrested for all three of those things.
Right.
No, they go, wow, that person had a really bad night.
Yeah.
Right? So this is easy. This isn't a contradiction. I'm not even sure why it's on their website. Usually they're much more difficult than this. This is simply multiple people accusing Jesus of different things. Hey, Dr. Ross, is there anything you want to add to that?
I think you guys did a great job answering that one.
Yeah. So, is there anything we talked about this a little bit last week, but do you find it true that a lot of people don't seek to give at least a little bit of mental credit when they're reading the scriptures? They're just out to attack?
Well, when I came to Christ, what I did is went through all the world's holy books and tried to put each of those holy books in the best possible interpretive light.
Wow.
And what I discovered is outside of the Bible, even if you put them in the best possible interpretive light, they're filled with internal contradictions. Now, you can find contradictions in the Bible if you interpret the Bible in the worst possible light. But in that case, you can find contradictions in any textbook and any statement that people make.
In anything.
Let's give the Bible the benefit of the doubt and see how well it stands up.
Yeah.
Given how many hundreds of times it predicts future history and future scientific discoveries, if you do put it in the best possible light and it's not inspired by the one that did the deed, you're going to find multiple provable contradictions and false predictions. The fact that we can't find any provable contradictions or false predictions tells us this book indeed must be inspired by the one that did all the events that we're seeing described there.
I love it. And that's the answer for a contradiction today.
Bible contradiction.
All right, let's get back to this Star of Bethlehem stuff.
Yeah, okay, so we only got a couple minutes left, but Dr. Ross, could you give us a little... I'm a little concerned here because, we always tell people, look, don't get into horoscopes, don't get into astrology, Ouija boards, anything like this, where you're trying to predict the future or know things ahead of time unnaturally. That's not of God. Isn't that what these guys were doing?
Well, that supposition is based on the fact that the word magi could be translated as astrologer. But if you look at the book of Daniel and his three friends were described as wise men, and they were part of a community beyond the Jews that were also wise men. And what does the text say? They were trained in all the sciences and arts of the East. And that probably included astrology. Now, that doesn't mean that they believed astrology, but they were certainly exposed to that line of teaching. And so there's nothing in either the book of Daniel or the book of Matthew that would persuade you that they must be astrologers. Yes, they probably were exposed to the astrological teachings, but these were people that were clearly at a high respect for Holy Scripture. Because just based on one book of the Bible, the book of Daniel, look at the money and time they spent to go to Jerusalem, not even knowing the location, but confident that if they went to Jerusalem, there would be people there that could help them. After all, I think they reasoned, if Daniel gives us the timing of the coming of the Messiah, some other book of the Bible must tell us the location. And indeed, that's what they discovered. The book of Micah.
Yes, Micah, absolutely.
The book of Micah indeed gives you the specific location. And
That's
so they were joined. But look at the faith these men had. Based on just one passage in the book of Daniel, they were prepared to invest all that treasure and time. Messiah.
That's awesome. All right. Hey, do you have time to stick with us for just a few extra minutes?
Sure.
Okay, so we're going to do a little bit more for the podcast listeners only. Right now, we're coming to an end. You need to get over to truthrevolution.tv. And at truthrevolution.tv, you're going to find links to reasons.org. You're going to find ways to get a hold of Reasons to Believe, to donate to Reasons to Believe, to get their resources.
Right.
You're also going to be able to donate to our show. You know, you all make this happen. Without you, we wouldn't be able to be on 13 channels, the TV station, and YouTube.
Right. And we've been doing it for 5 years now.
Yeah.
And it's all thanks to you.
So this is great. Well, I wouldn't say all. I'd say God has a big role to play there.
Hey, man, I would say that. But, you know, I mean, if it weren't for the monetary donations, yes, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And we want to see you out at Revolution Church on Christmas or today.
That's
10
right.
o'clock, 11:30, and 5 p.m.
Truth Revolution.
And we're back. We're online talking to Dr. Hugh Ross from Reasons to Believe.
Yeah, talking about the Star of Bethlehem, which he says was either a recurring nova or some sort of cataclysmic variable, but not a star, not a comet.
Right. Not like it's been portrayed. It's not a conjunction of planets or a planet with a moon.
That's right.
That's no moon. That's a space station.
Done. No, I don't have any Star Wars clips. But yeah, you still haven't disproven my Arrowhead Stadium theory.
I'm working on it.
You know, the Greek, the Eastern Orthodox Church, a beautiful poem comes out of there. It says, "Your birth, O Christ our God, dawned the light of knowledge upon earth. For by your birth, those who adored stars were taught by a star to worship you, the Son of Justice, and to know you, Orient from on high. O Lord, glory to you." And it's just a beautiful little poem there talking about the birth of Jesus Christ and following the Magi, following the star. That was from the Choparian in the Nativity. Excuse me, my throat is dying on me. But Dr. Ross, tell us a little bit more about this event in the East, the recurring nova. Do you have any sort of indication on dates of recurring novas? Can you calculate and find out when they happened, or is there any historical records or anything like that?
Well, today we astronomers are very carefully watching the skies to discover nova, and we discover about half a dozen per year. That's because we literally have thousands of people searching, telescopes looking. Back in the times of Christ, when at Christ's first coming, nova were extremely rare events because people weren't checking the skies every day, and certainly not down to the depth that would be necessary to discover nova. When I say astronomers today are discovering about half a dozen a year, some of these nova they're finding are not visible to the naked eye.
Wow.
But depending how far away the nova is, it could be as bright as, say, the star, the Polaris, the North Star, or it could be so dim you can't see it without a pair of binoculars. So the fact that the ancients picked up this thing tells us it was an unusual event. And so I think that's what motivated the Magi. I mean, if it was a comet, those happen quite frequently. Conjunction of planets are very frequent. That wouldn't be enough to motivate them. But seeing this star appear in a particular constellation and then disappear, they would see that as a rare enough event that it could be a sign of the coming of the Messiah. And keep in mind, they already had a reasonable idea of the timing of the coming of Messiah, because after all, in the book of Daniel, chapter 9, it actually tells you how many years will transpire between the signing of a decree by the Persian king to rebuild the city of Jerusalem and the coming of the Messiah. So they knew, at least to within plus or minus a few years, when the Messiah would come. And of course, I would expect they would be ardently looking for some kind of sign. But the subtlety of the sign, the fact that no one else noticed the event, is one reason why I think it was a recurring nova. Because that's sufficiently subtle that people not looking wouldn't have seen it. And yet sufficiently rare that the Magi would have seen this as a clear sign.
That's fascinating. Now, back then, they didn't have telescopes, or did they have different types of tools to look into the sky that we know of?
All they had was the naked eye. The astronomer did have tools for accurately discerning the position of different objects. They could do that to about a 15th of a moon diameter. And they would record the brightness of stars. I mean, we know the ancient Egyptian astronomers were very intent on looking at the variability of variable stars. So yeah, I mean, people back there were intensely interested in the heavens, and unlike people today, when they look up at the night sky, they could see 10 or 15,000 stars. Hey, where I live in the Los Angeles area, it's difficult for me to see 100 stars because of light pollution. In fact, I remember going to Shanghai, looking up at a clear night, I couldn't see a single star in the sky.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Heavens declare the glory of God, but that's on the presumption that you can actually see the heavens.
Right, amen.
Yeah, that reminds me of the kids movie. I can't remember the name of it. It's with a bunch of zoo animals, and they're in New York City, and so one of the animals goes, "Hey, look, the star's out tonight," and they all look up, and then it flies away, and they go, "Nope, helicopter." Right. But yeah, I mean that's really true. Their Wikipedia, I popped on there, and I got a list of different objects that people say it could have been, and planetary conjunction. Now, and the reason you say probably not a planetary conjunction was because Scripture defines this as one object. Is that correct?
That's correct. It says it's a single object that appears, disappears, and reappears about a year to a year and a half later. So yeah, that rules out a whole class of phenomena that could be candidates for the Christmas star.
Cool. Okay, and then it also talks about a comet or a supernova, but as you've mentioned before, the problem with those is that everybody could have seen them, and not just the Magi.
Don't appear in the same location.
Ah, okay, that's interesting. And then the one it mentions is and I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but heliacal or heliacal rising. Heliacal rising.
Yeah, I mean, when you get a sunrise or a sunset, you can get bright lights appearing on either side of the sun with a different color. Sometimes they refer to it as red flash or green flash. One reason I'm skeptical of those claims is the ancients didn't refer to that as a star. And moreover, that phenomena is limited to high latitudes. So yeah, if you're living in Iceland or in Antarctica, you would see that kind of phenomena, but not at the latitude of Jerusalem.
What if they were near Tibet when I guess they saw it at two locations though, so.
Right.
Yeah, the text does say that Magi came from the east. So yeah, if they came from Siberia, I mean, that's still east. That would be high enough latitude that could be the case. But notice again how Matthew says it reappears.
True.
And it's talking about these sun phenomena. They don't reappear with the same color and the same position. So I think that's ruled out as well. And again, what I've seen in most books is they try to claim it's a conjunction of planets of some sort.
Yes.
But again, wrong dates. They get the wrong dates, and it doesn't fit what Matthew states.
Yeah. One of them talks about Jupiter's annual cycle, saying that Babylonian astronomers referred to the planet at meaning a white star, and that there were some celestial events that were centered on the planet's annual cycle and could have been associated with Judaism and the Messiah. What do you think about that?
Yeah, most books that make that claim, because there was a conjunction of Jupiter with the star Regulus, And so they're saying, hey, brightest planet, coming close to the brightest star in the constellation Leo. And Leo, of course, is a reference to the lion. And the star Regulus is called the king star. And so, they kind of read into that, oh, this is the king from the tribe of Judah, and a lion is a symbol of the tribe of Judah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how they word that in. But once again, you got the problem. The text says a single star that disappears and reappears in the same location. And the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn did not reoccur in one location with the necessary timing. So that's the problem with those. But that probably accounts for the majority of books written on the Christmas star.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it absolutely does. So now it does say that it happened probably about September 3 BC, which would be close to the right year, but probably not the right month. But so anyway,
keep in mind that the best date we have for the death of Herod is 4 BC.
Yeah, that's true.
Which means that the two appearances of the star would have to take place before 4 BC.
Mm-hmm.
So I would probably put the birth of Jesus at 5 or 6 BC.
Yeah.
So that's one of the big problems with these conjunctions. To get a conjunction that can in any way correspond to the text, you got the wrong date.
Yeah, and that date of 5 or 6 BC actually corresponds with a date of Quirinius being some sort of government leader as well. So
that's correct.
So yeah, and a lot of people will freak out. They're like, "Whoa, I thought Jesus was born 0."
Right.
But that's not the case, is it?
It's not the case, and the fact that we have plus or minus 5-year uncertainty is not at all surprising.
No. So, hey, thanks so much for joining us today. This has been great as always. They can go out to reasons.org. And what's the latest book that you've put out, Dr. Ross?
The latest book I've put out is Improbable Planet, which tells the story of how every event in the history of the universe, Earth, and Earth's life, and every component plays a critical role in making possible the redemption of billions of human beings in a short period of time. In fact, what I'm discovering is this may be a tool for more rapidly advancing scientific progress to literally interpret the realm of nature from a redemptive perspective. So the book tells that story.
I love it. And we had you on a guest here, and we talked about that a little bit. So if you guys want to learn a little bit more about it, you can go to Truth Revolution, type in Improbable Planet. But also, you can just go buy it. There's reasons.org. You can get it on Amazon.
Yep.
Let's link to that book. We're going to link to their website.
Definitely.
Thanks again for joining us today. Hey, have a great week, everyone. Get out to Revolution Church during Christmas on Christmas Day, 10 o'clock, 11:30, and 5 p.m.